Hey, y'all, welcome to the first episode of the newest podcast under the Raised Red Living Blue umbrella, and it's Alabama Unfiltered. So my goal for this podcast is to provide short podcast segments, trying to stay within 15 minutes. We'll see how this first episode goes. But the whole point of this podcast is to keep journalists honest in the state of Alabama. So not just the conservative outlets, because most of these news platforms in our state have, left-leaning and right-leaning journalists on them. So today we're talking about 1819 News. Tomorrow we could be talking about AL.com. But the piece we're going to be debunking today by 1819 News was published on January 11, 2026. It was titled January 6th Isn't Over. Former Pentagon insider Casey Wardynski explains what really happened in Washington. All right, so let's dive in and first look at the author. What are his credentials and experience? So he's a West Point graduate and retired U.S. Army colonel. That's pretty impressive. Served as Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower and Reserve Affairs under Trump until January 20th, 2021, and has held roles in defense, academia, and local education leadership. What he doesn't have is an eyewitness account of the events that happened on January 6th. So what I could find no evidence that he was physically present at the Capitol on January 6th. His comments on January 6th in the interview for 1819 News are based on opinion and interpretation, not documented firsthand observation of the Capitol breach. And I think that's important. If you're going to provide commentary, especially commentary that includes I have four misleading claims by Casey in this article. I think if you're going to provide an opinion or commentary at all about January 6th and you weren't there and you haven't interviewed like every single Capitol police officer, every single congressman and woman that was or felt threatened on that day, what are you doing? This is just all, typical, in my opinion, MAGA-leaning propaganda. The sources in their interview, this is what they appear to be: his own experiences in Washington and Pentagon bureaucracy, which have no bearing on Jan 6. General observations about military leadership and Jan 6 reporting. Speculative interpretation rather than verifiable data. There are no primary sources cited in this story. So, basically, in my opinion, this guy, even though he is a very successful individual, is talking out of his ass. So let's dive into I said there was four misleading claims, but these are the four most misleading claims. So if we had more than 15 minutes, we could probably dive into the rest of them, but we're under a time crunch. And again, really, I want to keep, the news outlets and journalists in Alabama honest, but I also want to provide a place where you guys can come and get unfiltered, no spin commentary. I don't want to use fact check because that's triggering to the MAGAs, but that's exactly what we're doing. All right. And there is so much stuff that comes out of 1819 and Yellowhammer that is just total bullshit, in my opinion. So let's go over misleading claim number one. January 6th isn't over. Wardynski suggests the event is ongoing as a political or operational situation and implies broad conspiracy interpretations. That's where you started to lose me right there, when you get into the conspiracy theory aspect of this and not eyewitness accounts from your personal interviews with these people that were actually there. So there have been civil and criminal proceedings, a lot of them since January 6th, with thousands charged. And saying it isn't over blurs the line between factual history and partisan narrative, rather than adding factual clarity. Now, I would say my little kind of footnote here on the fact that it isn't over I hear a lot of folks on the right talking about how the left just won't let it go. Just won't let it go. Well, a problem with that is we can't heal as a nation. We can't forgive. We certainly can't forget until those who are responsible for inciting an insurrection own up to what they did. All right, we've got a commander-in-chief who has still, not to this day, not conceded the election. All right, he's not admitted that he's lost, and he's going after the people that said he did. And we're active in trying to prove that he engaged in criminal activity over the events of January 6th. Misleading claim number 2, the Pentagon lost its mind and leadership may have wanted the riot. Leadership may have wanted the riot. Wardynski suggests Pentagon leadership may have purposely misled or contributed to the riot by prioritizing optics over security. I don't even know what the hell that means. Extensive reporting and a ton of investigating, including bipartisan select committees for January 6th, concluded that multiple agencies, Capitol Police, DC National Guard, did not adequately prepare despite intelligence warnings. But there's no credible evidence that the Pentagon, much less its leadership, intentionally provoked the riot. So unless you have credible evidence, and to rise to the rank of colonel in the Army and to put out statements without credible evidence, to me, is far more damaging than it just being misleading. It's irresponsible. It's irresponsible, okay? Misleading claim number 3. Army technology was used to rile up the crowd. Army technology was used to rile up the crowd. Wardynski reportedly says he suspects, no evidence, he suspects the Army deployed something like infrasound to manipulate the crowd, whatever the hell that means. And some folks in the Army were probably misled by top generals. All right, so this is pure conjecture. There is no publicly available evidence that any military technology was used to influence the crowd. Okay, so without documented sources, this type of statement is just speculation. And again, just totally irresponsible by somebody who has served so honorably in our military. I assume if you reach the rank of colonel, you have served honorably. All right, misleading claim number 4. We don't know who they is, I'm guessing the libs, wanted to create a situation where people die and then eliminate the Second Amendment. What? So the interview implies a conspiracy that January 6th attacks were engineered to generate deaths so that politicians could justify disarming Americans. Well, listen, there's been way more people killed in school shootings, and that has done nothing to help us enact stricter, more responsible gun law legislation. So people dying at January 6th, this sounds ridiculous. How would that sway the American public, much less the MAGA base that, yeah, we need to get rid of the Second Amendment and disarm Americans? Whew. All right, let me see what else I got for you here. So let's summarize this, like what he got wrong. We don't have time to talk about what he got right. I feel like if you put this much wrong or misleading information in a news article that you are publishing for the masses to read, specifically focusing on Alabamians here, you have a responsibility to come from a point or place or position of fact, in my opinion. All right, so let's review these claims real quick, and then I will provide my final thought. So is it an ongoing, controlled initiative on the part of partisan politicians to keep this January 6th narrative going and just keep bringing it up? And again, I would just tell you that there's no evidence of that. But the reason the commentary is still there is because there has been zero accountability for those who created, fostered, riled up the folks that violently attacked police officers and stormed the Capitol. Okay? Leadership is a top-down, especially when something as important as this, when we're talking about, freedom, democracy, public safety, some pretty important things. I think it's very, very important to have receipts. If you're going to make these claims, you got to back them up. And this is just absolutely ridiculous. Okay. So leadership is a top-down exercise, right? Especially when we're talking about issues that are important to public safety, democracy, freedom, the right to protest, a lot of things covered in the Constitution there. So what we need is for our commander-in-chief to own up to this lie so that we can start to move on from it. We cannot move on from it until those responsible own up to what they did, at the very least, own up to what they did, admit the wrongs. Man, that would go such a long way in healing our nation. The Pentagon leadership misled the American public deliberately, or their soldiers deliberately. There were a lot of active and retired duty military folks in attendance, I believe, on January 6th, but there's no evidence, again, of any government intentionally provoked or mismanaged events for some sort of political end or gain. There's no evidence. The Army used its technology to manipulate the crowd. That's another claim that we went over. No credible documentation supports a claim. It's just speculative, okay? And to speculate over something as serious as this, because y'all, this is a big point of contention that is dividing our country, right? That people, I've got MAGAs commenting on my content online saying that there's new evidence about to come out that proves that President Trump won in 2020. So this shit, this mess, this conspiracy, all this talk and bluster and pontificating is still alive and well. And again, it's because it's never been put to rest. That seems like common sense to me, y'all. All right, the goal of January 6th, for some, the goal of January 6th was to cause the deaths of American citizens so that the abolishment of the Second Amendment could be justified. To me, that is just asinine, given all we've gone through as a country, and nothing has even led us close to the abolishment of the Second Amendment. I don't care what anybody on the right says. They always want to say the left's after our guns. Every Democrat I know is a gun owner. Some are active gun carriers. We gotta cut the bullshit. Again, this is the point of what we're doing here. All right, so final thought. Mr. Wardynski's position and experience in the military give him the authority on military culture, but his commentary on January 6th lacks any verifiable sourcing and blends in speculation and conspiracy theories, and it's just opinion. It's just a bunch of bull. It makes for a discussion that I think, it's like if we're dealing with a TV show here, we're trying to get ratings, where they're trying to get readers, and they're trying to put out content that is going to meet their readership where they are. And where their readership is 100% against the left and the truth and facts, because this reporting has no basis of fact, and we deserve better as Alabamians. All right, thank you guys for listening and watching to the first episode of this new podcast venture here by us at the Raise Red Living Blue Network. Please stay tuned, like, subscribe, rate, so that you can obviously keep up with what we're doing here at Alabama Unfiltered, but also we want to reach more people. So if you're a frustrated Alabamian, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, right, and you just want some straight talk, I want this to be the podcast for you. Again, I'm your host, Jason Will. We'll see you on the next episode.